Welcome to Integrated Insights with ICCG. For more than 30 years, our team has partnered with small business owners to prepare for and navigate the business transaction process. Pull up a chair as we share stories and insights from our experience on all sides of the M&A table. All right, we're back for another episode. Today I have the founders of ICCG with me, Grant and Dave. My name is Michael. I'll be your host. Today we're going to be talking about growing your business. And in some cases, it's better for a business to grow organically, right? Or to grow in-house. Other times, growing by acquisition can be more favorable. So Grant, Dave, why would a company pursue growth through acquisition versus growing organically?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you as a business owner are considering, how to grow your business. But both of those strategies are necessary to contemplate, but there's a better way, and it's going to be based in your context. And so typically, a long time in the past when we owned some towing companies, we would go and we would buy a company that had a city contract. And so because those city contracts were super important to the success of the business holistically. And then we would go after accounts organically. If we were just wanting to widen our geography by gaining accounts in different places, we could just take a bunch of trucks and stick them in that area and take the business away from competitors. And so sometimes you grow because you want to add customers. Sometimes you grow because you want to add geography. And sometimes you want to acquire another company's products and distribution channel so you can throw your products through their distribution channel. So it's not like you're establishing the same business in a different area. You're actually buying a completely different product line with a different distribution channel that can be used to throw your products through, and then you could use their products to throw through your distribution channel. But they're completely two different animals. When you buy a company in another area or in your own area, it's a very different prospect than just trying to grow by adding geography or adding customers in a different area.
Right. I think another part of that, Grant, is, that's talking from a business owner standpoint. And if you want to talk from a buyer standpoint, we deal with a lot of private equity groups and, people who may be wanting to expand their business. So when we talk to what we call buy side people, right, they're looking at this maybe a little bit differently than like a business owner. Business owners wanting to grow, like you say, organically or through acquisition. They're looking at maybe they want to buy their first one is going to be their platform company. And then for a lot of, it's no secret out there, a lot of the private equity groups, they kind of go off this 3 to 7 year flip on the business, but they're growing. They want to grow fast. They want to get their EBITDA up to a certain level. And once that, EBITDA gets up there, they can flip it for a higher multiple. So they're wanting to grow through acquisition because it's a quicker way to the end goal. But their end goal, the motives are pure, right? The end goal is that money grab. So for most of them, but from a business standpoint, and I know that when we had the towing companies, we did both, right? And I think for a business owner who's wanting to be smart and they're in it for the long term, they're going to grow organically. And also possibly look at acquisitions, because one of the best choices they may make is to buy out their competition, and then they can then collectively they're in a position to then grow greater organically. So,
what's the why behind that? I know you talked about they can grow faster through acquisition, and sometimes that's both companies, right? So they can acquire a company and both companies can actually grow faster. Why is that? Why is it sometimes faster to grow your customer base or your products or whatever by having another company instead of growing organically?
It's not just because of the speed, although that's definitely in the minds of a PE group, but it's also because of the certainty. If I go into another area and I buy a business, I'm going to do due diligence on that business. That's going to tell me, okay, that's going to yield $1 million of cash flow every year. It has existing equipment, it has existing employees, it has an existing facility. It's an existing name in that area. I know that I can carry on what I'm buying that's going to yield $1 million on the bottom line. When you grow organically and you invest money, you don't really know what the outcome is going to look like. You don't know what the extent of the outcome is, and you don't know what the timing of that outcome is. It could take you a long time because you don't understand the culture of that particular area of the country or area of town, and the outcome is uncertain. And so that's why purchasing a company sometimes is a little bit more of it's a less risky but a higher cost option initially.
Yeah, and I think that's what keeps people. I think that's what keeps people, Michael, from acquiring a lot of times. Is, I mean, maybe they've been debt free. We work with a lot of business owners who've grown their business over decades. They're debt free. Their balance sheet looks great, and to talk to them about, hey, why don't you go buy this company for $5 million? Well, they may not want to use the cash, and it's going to cost debt, and that's some people are adverse to that. So it all depends on the motive, I think, and how quickly someone wants to get to that goal. We may recommend that someone go out if they're selling their business. We may say, if you want to go on and prepare your business a little bit more, why don't you go buy another one? Let's get your bottom line up a little bit. And it's going to be worth that because you're going to be able to make it back in multiples after the sale if you buy something that's profitable. And so, again, we have a clients that buy a lot of in the medical space, and they're looking at how many patients come through their facilities, and it's very, very calculated. And so, for them to go out and buy something, they're going to basically buying patient count, and they know what to pay for the patient count. And but at the same time, they're not giving up on growing that company. They want all of their facilities to continue growing organically. But sometimes that helps because then they've got the mass. They may have the name recognition out there to help that around.
Yeah, it's such a better bet for a business owner to buy knowns. And so Dave's right. I mean, some people don't want to spend the money or borrow the money in order to expand. And unfortunately, not every effort to do the same thing that you've done in your existing facility can be duplicated elsewhere because the environment's different, the people in charge are different, and there's other competitive environments that you're not used to.
Yeah. That's great. So there's multiple factors, basically. What I kind of heard you guys saying is certainty can be a factor, right? Just taking some of the risk out of it there. Sometimes the trial and error there can be a high cost to the trial and error, but sometimes it's just goal driven. If they're already growing and they're growing as fast as they want to grow, there's not really a reason to make that change. But if they're growing, but they want to grow faster or they want to exit more quickly at a higher amount than what they're trending toward, then that might be a reason for acquisition. So that's awesome. So you talked a little bit about the towing industry and what it can look like there. How can this conversation change over industry? How can industry affect the choice?
Yeah, we just talked about the medical industry, and licensing is very important. There are other, zoning and those kinds of issues that you have to deal with in certain industries. A lot of people who are considering growth are talking about customer facing facilities when they're wanting to grow in other areas. And so so sometimes what you're going to buy is not necessarily a manufacturing plant. You're actually going to buy whatever is the customer facing piece of that. And so sometimes it's because you want the manufacturing piece because you want to buy capacity. that company has some customers, but they're not really that profitable, and you need capacity. And so in a manufacturing company that is built on, high capex manufacturing, you're going to buy the equipment anyway to expand. And that company over there, you can get it for basically the value of the equipment, if they're not making that much money. And you've got existing employees to operate existing capital equipment, and it's like instant capacity that you can then use in order to chew away at your backlog at your existing facility. So every industry has multiple ways and multiple reasons to expand.
So what about cultural differences? I think we've talked about an example on another podcast before about how cultural differences between two companies, an acquired company and the buyer, how can that play into this decision, and what can that look like?
Wow, we knew that, we learned that firsthand in one of our acquisitions in the towing industry, and it was just a surprise to us, I guess. You learn, look, if you're a business owner listening to this, you learn something almost every day. Well, we learned something. We bought this company and we tucked another one in under it, and we thought, well, we'll bring the dispatch together. And we found out real quickly that wasn't a good idea. They had dispatched totally different. It was a different socioeconomic situation in both locations, and it was oil and water, and it just didn't work. And it took what Grant, probably 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, something like that. And our managers came to us and said, we need to unwind this. And our we had the typical response of, well, Grant did, because he's the bean counter of the group. That's going to cost us too much money. But morale's worth a lot, right? And when you start changing over people cost a lot. And so it was well worth the money to honor the culture that had been built over the decades, and to honor that culture, and to try to build around that culture rather than trying to change the culture. And I think sometimes we try to go in and change culture rather than try to honor the culture that has been working hard for you for all those years. And so that's one way. Speaking of the medical world, the people we're working hard for right now, they've have acquired several locations, and one location was just run so differently than had, the employees were just treated very differently, and a lot of that came from some cultural things, and they had to go in and kind of really, they didn't want that culture because it was a very toxic culture, and so they had to really work and lost some people along the way because it was better to change the culture because it wasn't serving the patients well and it wasn't serving the community well. And so sometimes that's when a culture change is warranted.
Yeah, I would say, Michael, one of the things that came to mind was the times where the mistake one that Dave and I made, but the times where we get pulled into those things, unfortunately, it's either late in the game, where they've already identified the target and everything's go and please get this done quickly. It's just really hard then to come up with all of the cultural problems or those things that need to change. People are sometimes, particularly buyers of businesses, they look at the bottom line, they get romanced by the customer base, or they get romanced in this particular case by patient count or whatever. And you get what's called toxic positivity, right? You overlook some of the warnings that are there, and I think that's easy to do. And so having a sort of an independent look at it, or an advisor look at it from the outside, and not worry about being the Debbie Downer in the room, but really kind of look through, not necessarily coming up with ways why you shouldn't do it, but maybe giving you a task list that says, hey, you need to make sure that you cover this. And even in negotiating the deal, if in that particular case, our client priced into the deal the ability to turn over the staff. And so, and so, just we just help our clients have a little bit less of that bias or toxic positivity, I guess, and make sure that they're considering all of that when they price the deal.
I'll go one step further. When we know when we've worked with when we're working with really seasoned buyers, seasoned investment groups or seasoned PE groups or whatever, because they're asking the right questions about culture. They want to know about individuals. They want to get to know people. They want to get to know. We may not always let them get to know the people until late in the game, but they care a lot about that, and obviously it's probably because they've been burned before, and they know the difference with that. And so those are the right questions buyers need to be asking. And that's what's interesting about that is that's really caring well for the people that our sellers would want. One of the first things they always say is, we want our people well cared for. We want to make, this is family. We hear, how many times we hear that? All the time. This is family. We want to make sure that they're taken care of. Well, the way you do that is to make sure that hopefully the buyer's doing their diligence, and you're disclosing what you can as well.
It's not just diligence though, Dave. I've seen you make sure that our seller clients know a little bit more about the buyer from a standpoint of what they've done prior to that, how they are going to treat your people. And we sometimes talk to our people, our seller clients, and say, hey, you can probably get a better deal over here, and here's the difference. And is it worth your while knowing that this other group are seemingly good people and are going to and have proven themselves over prior deals of doing right by people. And so that's one of those things of us knowing the buyer, or having dealt with a buyer or know people who have dealt with that buyer, is super important, I think, and super helpful for our selling clients. We're not supposed to be biased towards a buyer, but we are.
Yeah, and I think that's right. We're not really supposed to. We were supposed to present all the deals, but at the same time, we're also being, paid to make sure we're finding the right buyer. And sometimes we tell people we can get a high price buyer, we can find the right buyer. Which one do you want? And more times than not, someone will take the right buyer if they really care about their people and their culture. And honestly, I think one of the things that people don't realize that people in our position actually do is we spend a lot of time vetting buyers. We spend a lot of time in the negotiation process asking these questions that will flesh out, we hope, will flesh out how someone's going to be treated. And we've had deals unwind in the middle of the process because it became real evident that these people weren't going to treat the sellers people right, and the sellers just turn around and unwound the whole thing. And we go back to the table and find someone else at that point. And yes, that's a shameless plug for good M&A advisors right there, because they should be working. Totally a shameless plug. Make sure whoever you're working with is doing work for your benefit.
Yeah. One of the things that can be super important to protecting your people is what the management teams look like on both sides, right? So what have you guys seen as far as management teams set up, whether it be strong or whether it be lacking, and how has that affected the options or how the transition took place?
Yeah, most of the transactions that we've done, I think the buyer is either a PE-backed business or a PE, a private equity group, who is not necessarily wanting to, expand by taking over the whole business and kick everybody out. Most people understand the risk of doing that is really high. I know that most people think that what happens is company A goes and buys company B, and they kick they fire half the people, and then they expect double the profit because of that. That's not really the case. I mean, there are some duplications they try to avoid, but at the end of the day, they know that they bought that business that is at this particular point, the way it is, it's all together and it's accomplishing something that is worth the price that they paid. And they wait until they get to know people, they get to know processes. The wise ones do anyway. They don't blow anything up, and it is difficult. The middle managers, getting along with a previous competitor. So if you go out and you buy a competitor, now all of a sudden I've got to ride for a different brand. That's hard. And so sometimes you've got some work to do there. And our clients have to do, the seller clients have to do some selling. Hey, for the last 20 years, I've told you that those guys are idiots, and now they're your best friends, and so that's hard. But it happens every day, and change is hard. You have early adopters and you have people that will never be okay with it, and they will sometimes leave.
Yeah, I think management teams, Michael, are extremely important. We really try to encourage most of the companies, like Grant said, have the management team in place, and there's a place for them most of the time. Most of your PE groups. So again, this gets back to the conversation we don't want to have today. We've had other days about strategic versus financial buyers. The strategic buyer will come in. They may have a upper level management team that they can put in place, or have someone that they can put in place. But typically, no matter who, a financial buyer definitely wants a good management team in place, and oftentimes that makes it difficult for the owner to leave. And I think the other thing that we overlook when we talk about people, and we probably should have brought this up earlier on when we're talking about acquiring. One thing that's happening in the trades world, out in the construction trades business out there, is oftentimes companies are buying other companies. They're acquiring them they want the accounts, but they also want the people, because people are so tough to find. The tradespeople are really, really in high demand right now. And I know up in the Pacific Northwest, you may have an electrical company buy another electrical company just because they want their electricians. They're just trying to, because they're just not available. So there's just nuances to every deal out there.
Yeah, that just goes back to that whole capacity thing, right? You're buying capacity because maybe not for equipment, but for people, because sometimes it's easier to make a sale than to fulfill the sale.
One last question before we wrap up here. So sometimes it can be awkward to start these conversations, and maybe there's a business owner out there that wants to find a buyer for their business, wants to buy another business, something like that. But they don't have anyone in mind. They don't have a friend that's doing it that makes it a natural transition. How can talking to an intermediary like us, how can we help in that process?
I think we have this same discussion with people, and just, I think, if you're working with somebody who has experience in seeing how different deals roll, then I think that you're going to be able to, and that own businesses themselves. And I think that becomes a little bit of an anomaly out there when you start trying to find M&A advisors who actually have run a lot of businesses themselves. I think that's maybe one thing that we have some experience with that in a lot of different industries. But, having those specific stories, but having others examples to be able to sit down with people and say, these are different ways this can go. Let's walk through, let's see what you think would be best. And if you're preparing to sell in the future and they think, we'll walk through we'll help put the pro formas together and walk through the different scenarios. But I think finding someone that has experience and has seen real deals happen, I think that just walking through with them, that's what I would say.
Yeah, Dave and I have always said that our clients, business owners that we've ever dealt with, are really, really smart. They make great decisions. That's why they've built successful businesses. And it's just that they've never been in our space. So maybe they've built a business up for 30 years or for 20 years, They haven't ever bought a business necessarily. They haven't ever folded two businesses together. They've never really remotely managed a business because they're inside of the building where they are right now, and they're buying a business somewhere in Texas that is remote from them. And so how do I manage a remote business? And so and I would say this just goes to all of the transactions that we do. A lot of those business owners do nothing because they don't have answers to their questions. And therefore they, even as smart as they are, the lack of information or the lack of answers or even understanding who to go to ask those questions just paralyzes the process. And so if they just sat down with us and just brainstormed and said, hey, what if, again, Dave said, we've got experience doing all of it. We know what the process looks like. We know what he's going to have to spend for a specific type of business. And he can then prepare and see whether he has an appetite after spending time with us. And we can certainly help them go out and purchase a business. And we'll talk to him. I mean, look, we'd love to buy a business for somebody, but if it's not the right answer, and the right answer is to go stick some equipment in another zip code and start a business and do it organically, then he's going to know that because he's smart enough to figure that out. It's just the buying of a business that sometimes people get really, really paralyzed about because they just don't know who to ask and they don't even know what questions to ask.
I would add that I've seen this team do a really great job in one, if there's a relationship between the buyer and the seller, protecting that relationship. And two, quarterbacking communication, right? And just not allowing any kind of relationship. The fact that they're both in the industry, that they both earned and developed this, to come into the negotiation and come into the process of the mergers, the acquisition. So really love seeing that from this team. Well, hey, Grant, Dave, thanks for joining me today. That's all we got for that episode.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of Integrated Insights with ICCG. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories from our team. We love hearing from our listeners. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please send us an email in the show notes. For more information about ICCG, please check us out on our website or follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, there's always a seat at our table.